Hello, grade 12s. Welcome back. It's Economics with Ms. Piwe. And in this lesson, we are looking at the cost-based analysis. So just before the break, we were talking about the Gautrain project and also trying to understand what would be the costs that would need to be taken into consideration when building such a project. So let's have a look at the different costs that would be involved. So starting with the private costs over here. So we now talking about the Gautrain project. So they would include the cost of land, because land had to be purchased in order to build the railway line and the stations and so on, and the warehouse for the buses, the service area for the trains. So land had to be purchased in all of this to be possible. And then also the cost of building material and equipment as well had to be taken into consideration. Remember, this project required very sophisticated equipment, so some of it had to be sourced from other countries and then to be brought into the country, because we didn't have such sophisticated equipment to carry out some of the job specifications that were involved in this project. The transport costs of bringing in and shipping in equipment, and also most importantly the labor costs that were involved, because this was such a huge project and it was very labor intense because of the specs that were involved in this particular project. And then overhead costs had to be considered as well when running this project. So these are some of the private costs that they were most likely to incur in the process of building the railway line. And then also, let's have a look at the private benefits of this. So the train fares that would be charged, we know it doesn't come cheap. You pay a decent amount of money to use the facility. But for other people, convenience comes first before the amount that they have to pay to use the train, because you can save time and you don't have to sit in traffic. So people are willing to pay for the fares that are involved. And then also the subsidies from government. So this project had to be subsidized by government because of the social benefits that it would bring. And also money from allowing companies to advertise as well. So companies would advertise on the stations. If you go to the Sandton station, you can see there are digital boards at the different levels, and companies use that facility to advertise. So then that's money coming in as well. So here it's more of the inflow of money into the project itself. And this has to be considered in order to keep the project running, and also for maintenance of the trains and the railway line and the train stations and security and so on. So that would come from the private benefits. And then also there will be external costs that are involved, starting off with pollution. We know that government is very strict on regulations around pollution, and there are fines that are imposed to companies that are seen to be polluting the environment. So that had to be considered. And also the destruction of plants, animals, and insects as well. So natural species had to be tampered with in order for the project to take place, because the land that was purchased from here had its own residents, the plants and the animals that lived in those areas, and that they had to be destructed. So that needs to be taken into consideration as well. But most importantly, the challenge was the resettlement for people whose homes were expropriated. This was quite a big thing, because negotiations had to happen between the project leaders and the people that owned those properties, where they needed to purchase those properties in order to develop the railway lines. But there were nice settlements that were given to those people so that it becomes worth their while in order to move. For example, there's a school in Rosebank that benefited from this. Their school is next to the Rosebank Gautrain station, and so the project had to buy the piece of the school's land in order to develop the Rosebank station. And then the school got a lot of money which they used to improve their facilities. So it was quite a win-win situation for all the parties involved there. And then also the increased traffic in certain areas and also the blockages of certain driving routes. Okay, so certain routes had to be blocked because of the projects that were taking place in the different parts of Gauteng. So that resulted in increased traffic, but also there were blockages. There were certain routes that were blocked and then people couldn't use. So it was quite of a chaotic situation. Okay, so then let's look at the external benefits. So the employment and income. So that was a huge benefit because now there were a lot of people that were employed. Remember here we spoke of the labor cost, and then we said this was quite a labor intense project. So it created a lot of employment opportunities, and as a result of that, there was income generated. So households now have an income that they could spend in order to purchase consumer goods in order to satisfy their needs. Also, there were opportunities for new businesses as a result of this project, because this project was something that was quite new in our country, and therefore there were opportunities for new businesses to come out based on the project and the different aspects of the project that were involved. So that created a lot of new business ventures. Time saved because of the high speed of the train. That is a huge factor. We know that time in business is a big thing, and hence, business people don't like you to be late for meetings because if you delay them, and then, they could be making money. They say time is money. So the fact that people could save time, it means that they can now generate more money because they don't have to sit in traffic to go to this meeting and that, but they could just hop onto the train and then be taken to their destination as well. Fewer accidents and less traffic, so that's actually a huge benefit because there are more people using the train, so we have less accidents happening on the roads because usually when people are rushing to the airport, then they drive over the speed limit, and then that causes problems and so on. So, but now people know that they can just go to Sandton or just from Johannesburg to Sandton, and then from Sandton take the Gautrain to the airport. So that has resulted in fewer accidents happening and also less traffic on the roads. And also the last point then, so there's less strain on medical facilities as well because of the fewer accidents that are now happening on the roads based on the project itself. So these are the external benefits, and then the costs, and then over here you've got the private costs and the private benefits, and then over here we looked at the external costs and also the external benefits of this particular project. So once all benefits and costs were determined, it was eventually decided that the idea of the Gautrain would benefit society more than harm it, because then, what were the challenges? Was it going to cause any harm to the society? So then they realized that there were more social benefits that were involved in this project. So planning for the Gautrain started in 2000, but the building only started in 2006, okay? And then we know that when the World Cup in 2010 started, there was the first phase ready, and then the following year, the other routes were opened. So we are benefiting as society from this particular project. So this is just to show you the application of the cost-based analysis, that these are the different costs that they would look at when they are doing the feasibility study. Moving right along, so the cost benefit analysis process. So it's important to understand the process as well. So the first step in the process is to compile a comprehensive list of all the costs and benefits associated with the project or decision. Okay, so we need to have this comprehensive list. The word comprehensive actually expresses that this needs to be a detailed list with all the costs and the benefits that are associated with the project or with the decision. So this list needs to be compiled and it needs to be made available. So that would be the first step in the process. Then the second step would be the costs should be included or should include direct and indirect costs, intangible costs, opportunity costs, and also the cost of potential risks. So you will see, I know that some of you are going to go and study the Bachelor of Business Science or a BCom in economics. You will see that it's important when you're looking at costs, not just to look at the direct costs that you are most likely to incur, but also to look at the indirect costs as well, and also the intangible costs, the ones that you can't physically touch, but you know that you are most likely to incur, and also the opportunity costs, when we look at that graph in economics, when we look at the opportunity cost. So that needs to be taken into consideration as well. And also the cost of potential risks. What could go wrong? What are the liability clause looking like? Do we need to insure some of the things? We've got workers working on site and it's a dangerous task that they are performing. So, in terms of health and safety, have we taken all the necessary steps in the process? So that needs to be compiled in the feasibility study so that when there are questions asked around this particular matter, then they can be addressed accordingly, because an extensive study has been done in terms of all the different costs that need to be considered as we go into this project. Now, moving on to benefits. So benefits should include all direct and indirect. So we also have direct and indirect revenues, intangible benefits such as increased production from improved employee safety and morale, and also increased sales from customer goodwill. So now we're looking at the revenue that is most likely to be generated from this project. But also here, we are looking at intangible benefits, the morale that you have created. Because if your workers are happy, then they become, more productive in what they are doing because they feel valued. So all those things need to be taken into account when we are looking at the benefits of such a project. And also here, the direct and indirect costs are also involved and need to be taken into consideration. And then a common unit of monetary measurement should then be applied in all items on the list. So now we need to bring in the monetary measurement into this equation that we have created. Remember, the first step was to generate this comprehensive list with all the costs and the benefits that are associated with the project or decision. So now that that's done, a monetary measurement needs to be completed to see what would be the monetary value of the project itself, because budgeting now needs to take place. So we need to associate monetary measurements to the costs and benefits that we identified earlier on. Also, care should be taken into account not to underestimate the costs and overestimate the benefits. Okay, so this is an important phase, because if we underestimate the costs, because you need the monetary value in order to develop a project, you can't just do it over the benefits. So you need to ensure that you don't overestimate the benefits and underestimate costs, because costs are needed in terms of ensuring that the project does carry on. And then also a conservative approach with a conscious effort to avoid any subjective tendencies, then when calculating estimate is best suited when assigning value to both costs and benefits for the project. Okay, so this is quite an interesting point, and I would like us just to spend a bit of time just going over it, because now we are now doing the calculation. So we come to the most important part that would actually determine whether the project will go ahead or not. So it's important that we apply a more conservative approach with a conscious effort to avoid subjective tendencies when calculating the estimates for this particular project in terms of assigning value to both the costs and the benefits for the purpose of the cost benefit analysis. Okay, so when we have this document ready, we must make sure that correct processes and procedures were taken or were followed, so that when we make this decision, we can say this is an informed decision based on the valid information that we have from the feasibility study. So that will need to be considered when we have the final document that we are going to now present to the stakeholders. Then the final step is to quantitatively compare. So we need to, those that do research, when we talk about the quantitative research. So now we need to compare the results of the aggregate costs and benefit to determine if the benefits outweigh the costs. If so, then the rational decision is to go forward with project. If not, a review of the project is warranted to see if adjustments can be made to either increase benefits or decrease the costs that are involved in making the project. Okay, so a lot needs to happen at this final stage. So remember, it's important that we now take the aggregate costs and benefits in order to determine if the benefits outweigh the costs. Okay, so I asked this question earlier on, or I said that I did come across this question that said, the costs are high, but also the benefits do outweigh the cost, and the government decides to carry on with building a project because of the benefits that are associated with the project. So in other instances, they would say, let's have a review of the project and see if we can make certain adjustments in order to increase the benefits or to decrease the costs to make the project viable. If not, the project may be abandoned. So if they feel that it's not really worth it, then they will say, you know what, we're just going to abandon the project based on the cost-based analysis or the cost-benefit analysis that has been given to us. So we are going to now just abandon the project because, the study or the information or the final outcome that we got from the cost-benefit analysis stipulates or says that the project is not viable, and we've tried to adjust the costs, that didn't work. We've tried to increase the benefits and or decrease the costs, and then that didn't work. So we're just going to abandon the project. So before we carry on, let's take a short break, and I will see you right after this.